Good morning to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our weekly tropical weather outlook for today, Saturday, January 11th, 2025. Let's start off with the NOAA Coral Reef Watch sea surface temperature anomalies, like we do every single week, updated as of yesterday for January 10th. Um, the general pattern remains the same: very warm Atlantic, very warm Caribbean, especially the Gulf of Mexico, and also some warm patches off the East Coast, but you're starting to see right along the coast with the shelf waters, a lot of these very cold anomalies begin to pop up. Of course, associated with all the Arctic air that we've had in the eastern United States, I guess it is starting to begin to cool off some of the shelf water, but the Caribbean remains the same. The entire Atlantic, especially the eastern Atlantic, remains the same. And this will be a very interesting to watch into how long it persists, especially as we get closer towards the spring and summer months when we'll begin to talk about hurricane season a lot more. But for now, it is January, so this is something that we kind of watch as the weeks go by. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, with the La Nina, yes, according to the National Weather Service, the Climate Prediction Center, it is actually officially a La Nina now, although you could kind of see, I guess it's somewhat on its way out. Still remaining very cold in the Central Pacific, but starting to see some warm up occurring in the Eastern Pacific. I guess this may be a sign of La Nina eventually going to weaken, I guess, in the next coming weeks, and we're starting to see, I guess, warmer water begin to make its way to the surface in the Eastern Pacific. The question will be, though, how much does this erode the rest of the colder water that is in the Pacific, especially towards the central and western part of the basin, and how much will all of this warm up as we head into the spring and summer, and will it become an El Nino? But once again, kind of want to mention the point that yes, officially, this is now a La Nina, and as you can see, La Nina conditions are present. This was released this past week on Thursday. La Nina conditions are present, and they are expected to persist through February to April, so late winter into early spring, and then they expect an ENSO neutral transition. So La Nina pretty much expected for the rest of the winter. And then by the time we get to the spring, ENSO neutral conditions will take over the Pacific. And then, very interestingly enough, you can actually see for the first time the August, September, October period for 2025. And you notice, very interestingly, um, El Nino conditions do actually begin to go up in chance, but of course, this is all far out. This is getting towards the summer and fall, and it's just a matter of how warm does the Pacific get into whether or not we'll have a good chance for an El Nino, or maybe we'll get a chance for a La Nina once again as we head towards the end of the year, and that'll come to discussion of hurricane season. But that is still very far out. The latest weekly ENSO anomalies, at least by the Climate Prediction Center, this was their latest. They release weekly updates on the ENSO. Didn't bring up the daily update today. I'm not sure if it's updated yet. But here's the weekly one. The latest departure is at negative zero point 0.7 Celsius. So definitely weak La Nina because the threshold is negative zero point 0.5. So La Nina is definitely in place, although it is weak, and it's probably not going to last long. But this is very interesting. This is the equatorial temperature below the surface. So this is pretty much the sea surface temperature anomalies on the Pacific at the equatorial region, and then you actually look at it below the surface. This is very interesting that over the last several weeks, especially since later in the year last year, the cold pool in the Pacific has gotten more pronounced. We kind of went from ENSO neutral pretty much around November to we saw a very strong surge in trade winds along the Pacific. And it seems to really have helped the cold pool below the surface. So I guess whatever La Nina is in place right now, there is some basis of cold anomalies below the surface for it to work with. But if you look at the SOI dashboard, It's very evident that trade winds were very strong, especially in November and into December. The SOI was roaring at 14 points, as much as 14 points positive, which, by the way, when it comes to the SOI, first of all, it's a measure of trade winds along the Pacific, so very much goes hand in hand with La Nina and El Nino. Positive values, especially if they're at um, positive +7 and higher, really represents strong trade winds in the Pacific, enough so that it is a La Nina. And we were as high as 14 points above normal in the 30-day average, and the 90-day average also got to a solid 7 points for a while. But very interestingly enough, over the last several weeks since December, the SOI has really collapsed, and now we're only at 2 points above normal. So I guess what this tells me is La Nina is here. The SO, the 90-day average is, by the way, at 6 points. So we're kind of on the cusp. So there is a La Nina in place, although it is a weak La Nina. And then I guess it really depends on how much does this cold pool last in terms of helping keep afloat whatever weak La Nina we have, which will especially be significant by the time we get to the spring and summer when it comes to hurricane season, and also talks about severe weather season for the spring as well, because La Nina does also impact the severe weather season and also the rest of the winter season too. And also another part of when it comes to winter and severe weather is the Gulf of Mexico, because the warmer the Gulf is, and actually, really quickly, if you look at the anomalies in the Gulf, it is very warm. So that will have its impact on severe weather season too, because more moisture in the Gulf means more moisture transported into the southeast, which kind of gives a boost to large severe weather events, especially as noted over the last several years. And even just over the last several weeks, we've had some pretty significant severe weather events across the South, especially given that we're pretty much in the winter months. And it's still generally warm in the Gulf. The southern Gulf, especially, still temperatures 25 degrees Celsius, even a few 26s, although 26 is not widespread anymore, not especially like it would be in, let's say, June or July. And along the Gulf Coast, the northern Gulf Coast, the shelf waters, you are starting to see some of these much colder temperature readings appear, because once again, it is January and we're starting to get some of that cold Arctic air to move south. And if we widen that view to the entire U.S. coastline and as well the Caribbean too, you can see, especially off the coast of Florida and off the coast of the Carolinas too, rapidly dropping off from 20 degrees Celsius to even lower. And then obviously in the mid-Atlantic, very, very cold temperatures, although that's typical given that it is January. But along the Gulf Stream, it's still generally warm. 26 kind of poking out into the northern Gulf of Mexico. I'd imagine over the next several weeks, as we get more Arctic air, this will probably choke away, and the 26 degrees Celsius line will probably completely tuck itself into the Caribbean. But the Caribbean is still warm right now. Most of the Caribbean is at least at 26 degrees Celsius. And there's even large chunks of the southern and eastern Caribbean still with readings at 28, which is enough, more than enough, for tropical systems to still be able to develop, obviously, given the threshold is 26 degrees Celsius for favorable sea surface temperatures for tropical storms to develop. But obviously, we're not going to get any because it's January and there's very strong upper level westerly winds, wind shear, which obviously is why we don't see development in the off season. So moving away from the tropics, let's go to weather across the United States. There is some winter weather advisories up for the northern part of the country. There's also some winter weather advisories in effect for western North Carolina and also western Virginia and portions of western Pennsylvania too. There's a snow system that did move by, and it did actually bring some accumulating snow to portions of the deep south, especially the northern parts of Mississippi, Alabama, and even Georgia. There was actually some accumulating snow totals actually in Atlanta, if you can believe it, this is the snow reports over the last 24 hours. 3 inches recorded in Atlanta. Very, very much, I guess, a welcome surprise, especially given that the Deep South has not had significant snow, especially North Carolina, but Western North Carolina too. Lots of significant snow. Even some reports. This is Newfound Gap, North Carolina, 8 inches, and even in Arkansas as well, and back to Oklahoma. Look at that. Some areas seeing 12, even 13 inches. So we had a significant snowstorm move through the south, gave accumulating snow to portions of the south that have not seen it in quite a while. We even saw, look at that, 6 inches in portions of far northwest Atlanta, I get, not Atlanta, Georgia, and northern Georgia, where it is more mountainous. So they, of course, did receive some extra snow given the higher elevation, but still lots of snow over portions of the south. And it looks like whatever system this was associated with that did move offshore. And then let's bring it back to the west. There are still red flag warnings in effect for portions of Southern California. Obviously, no explanation needed to what's happening. The absolutely devastating wildfires in LA. Absolutely devastating what has happened there, and they're still ongoing. And do not let your guard down because red flag warnings are still in effect. Santa Ana winds are going to kick up again tonight to gusts. I looked at the actual advisory. Gusts are expected to increase once again to 65 miles an hour. Obviously, not as high as what we saw earlier this week when wind gusts were hurricane force winds, as much as 85 to 100 miles an hour, which is why the wildfires were able to spread super quickly. And unfortunately, they wiped out a lot of homes. There's going to be a lot of recovery needed in LA, and hopefully, they are able to get that recovery as well. There's a lot going on in terms of, the wildfire fighting and recovery, both in the civilian and the political aspect of it too. It's generally a huge mess right now in Southern California, and I really hope people are able to recover there. Really a terrible situation that happened. But also, interestingly enough, we have some freeze warnings for southern Arizona. I wonder if this is for mountainous areas, but still, generally, besides that, quieter in terms of current weather. If we look at the Storm Prediction Center for severe weather, no thunderstorms expected today, so nothing to worry about when it comes to severe weather, and that remains the case for tomorrow and Monday, and seemingly for the next several days, at least the next week or so. Things will be quiet. And let's actually take a look at the GFS to get a idea of what weather looks like. You could clearly see some, I guess, mountainous snow for the northwest and portions of the northern Midwest, and then a low pressure does move through. I guess this is associated with those winter weather advisories across portions of the northern United States. And then there is some rain for the south, so that is 3 days. And then we go to 5 days. Generally quiet. Some, I guess this is lake effect snow that occurs across portions of the northern Midwest and the Northeast, including Western New York. That at least that looks like lake effect snow. Probably generally cold weather remains in the eastern United States. The cold pattern that we have in place now expected to remain for quite a while, at least over the next week. And then it seems like an Arctic front kind of develops, or whatever, this frontal system, strong low pressure over Canada develops a front that extends all the way into the southern United States. And then maybe that might actually be a signature for severe weather as we head towards the end of next week. So maybe that'll be something we need to watch, especially low pressure that develops over the northern Gulf Coast. So there's maybe something to watch with severe weather as we head towards the end of next week. Let me actually see the Cape really quickly, if I can find it. Can I find it? Let me see. Cape. No, never mind. Actually, wait. The thermodynamics. SB Cape. Here we go. Is there a Cape? There's something. So we'll see. Maybe there's severe weather. That definitely looks like a strong front, though, that develops towards the end of next week. So maybe we'll enjoy a generally quiet week with weather in the United States, especially hopefully it's quiet for portions of Southern California and they're able to clean up after the mess we saw with those very, very horrendous wildfires that happened this past week. And hopefully, we're also able to remain on the quiet side for everybody, and we don't have to deal with severe weather over the next week. At least it remains that way. So enjoy the quiet weather. And also, if you have snow, enjoy it as well. Definitely envying you here in the Northeast, as we still have yet to get any sort of significant snow, especially in the Northeast. Although we have gotten some snow this winter, although without snow right now, hopefully that is able to change though over the next several weeks. We'll see. With that being said, though, I'm going to end it off for today's video. Hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed what you saw today, please, I encourage you, like, comment, subscribe, share with family and friends. And if you want to get these weekly videos right as they come out, I also encourage you to subscribe. Have a great rest of your week. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. Sending prayers to those in Southern California. If you know a loved one that is affected, I'm sending my prayers and my best wishes to you. And we will talk again very soon.